So, hello and welcome back yet again to Mr. Charles Dickens's novel, A Tale of Two Cities, and my camera doesn't want to stay level. Anyway, how are you all doing? Are you enjoying the book? Are you finding it hard to follow? I think that's my biggest complaint about it is it it reminds me a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde. It's better than Jekyll and Hyde, in my opinion, in that the story is here. But like Jekyll and Hyde, like Robert Louis Stevenson, Dickens seems to be more of an atmosphere type writer. And as I've said before, so many words. And I love words. I love words so much. But you can use too many words to describe something and lose your reader. And I mean, that could just be a me thing. I am still really enjoying the story. It's starting to pick up a little bit. I mean, now we know exactly why Mr. Charles Darnay was going back and forth between France and England. It's because he's got family in France and family that sounds like they're nobility, so I wonder if he's going to lose his head. And we ended up the last chapter with his uncle being found dead in his bed with a dagger through his chest, saying that it was from Jacques, who I'm still putting my vote in that Jacques is the father whose child got run over by the Marquis. That gives him a very strong motive, at least in my mind. In fact, in my mind, I'm also betting he was probably the person that was seen under the carriage hanging there. I don't know if I'm right or not. And I don't know, where this book is going next, but we shall find out as we jump back into Book 2 of A Tale of Two Cities, The Golden Thread, with Chapter 10, Two Promises. More months, to the number of 12, had come and gone, and Mr. Charles Darnay was established in England as a higher teacher of the French language who was conversant with French literature. In this age, he would have been a professor, but in that age, he was a tutor. He read with young men who could find any leisure and interest for the study of a living tongue that was spoken all over the world, and he cultivated a taste for its stores of knowledge and fancy. He could write of them, besides, in sound English, and render them into sound English. Such masters were not at that time easily found. Princes that had been, and kings that were to be, were not yet of the teacher class, and no ruined nobility had dropped out of Tellson's ledgers to turn into cooks and carpenters. As a tutor whose attainments made the student's way unusually pleasant and profitable, and as an elegant translator who brought something to his work besides mere dictionary knowledge, young Mr. Darnay soon became known and encouraged. He was well acquainted, moreover, with the circumstances of his country, and that was of ever-growing interest. So with great perseverance and untiring industry, he prospered. In London, he had expected neither to walk on pavements of gold nor lie on beds of roses. If he had any such exalted expectation, he would not have prospered. He had expected labor, and he found it, and he did it, and he made the best of it, and in this his prosperity consisted. A certain portion of his time was passed at Cambridge, where he read with undergraduates as a sort of tolerated smuggler, who drove a contraband trade in European languages instead of conveying Greek and Latin through the custom house. And the rest of his time he passed in London. Now, From the days when it was always summer in Eden to these days when it is mostly winter in the fallen latitudes, the world of men has invariably gone one way, Charles Darnay's way, the way of the love of a woman. He had loved Lucy Manette from the hour of his danger. He had never heard a sound so sweet and dear as the sound of her compassionate voice. He had never seen a face so tenderly beautiful as hers when it was confronted with his own on the edge of the grave that had been dug for him. But he had not yet spoken to her on that subject. The assassination at the deserted chateau far away beyond the heaving water, and the long, dusty roads, the solid stone chateau, which had itself become the mere mist of a dream, had been gone for a year, and he had never yet, by so much as a single spoken word, told her of the state of his heart. That he had his reasons for this, he knew full well. It was again a summer day when, lately arrived in London from his college occupation, he turned the quiet corner in Soho, bent on seeking an opportunity of opening his mind to Dr. Manette. It was the close of a summer day, and he knew Lucy to be out with Miss Pross. He found the doctor reading in his armchair at a window. The energy which had at once supported him under his old sufferings and aggravated their sharpness had been gradually restored to him. He was now a very energetic man indeed, with a great firmness of purpose, strength of resolution, and vigor of action. In his recovered energy, he was sometimes a little fitful and sudden, as he had at first been in the exercise of his other recovered faculties, but this had never been frequently observable, and he had grown more and more to have them happen rarely. He studied a lot, slept a little, sustained a great deal of fatigue with ease, and was very cheerful. And to him now entered Charles Darnay, at the sight of whom he laid aside his book and held out his hand. "Charles Darnay, I rejoice to see you. We have been counting on your return these 3 or 4 days past. Mr. Stryver and Sidney Carton were both here yesterday, and both made you out to be more than due." "I am obliged to them for their interest in the matter," said Charles, a little coldly as to them, though very warmly to the doctor. "Miss Manette?" "She is well," said the doctor, stopping short, "and your return will delight us all. She has gone out on some household matters, but will soon be home." "Dr. Manette, I knew she was not home. I took the opportunity of her being away to beg to speak to you." That brought silence. "Yes," said the doctor with evident constraint. "Bring your chair and speak on." Charles complied as to the chair, but appeared to find the speaking less easy. "I have had the happiness, Dr. Manette, of being so intimate here," he finally began, "for a year and a half, and I hope the topic on which I am about to touch may not—" He was stayed by the doctor putting out a hand to stop him. When he had kept it that way a little while, he then said, as he pulled back, "Is Lucy the topic?" "She is." "It is hard for me to speak of her at any time. It is very hard for me to hear her spoken of in that tone of your voice of yours, Charles Darnay." "It is a tone of fervent admiration, true homage, and deep love, Dr. Manette." There was another blank silence before the doctor replied, "I believe it. I do you justice, I believe it." His constraint was so manifest, and it was so manifest too that it originated in an unwillingness to approach the subject that Charles Darnay hesitated. "Shall I go on, sir?" Another silence. Then, "Yes, go on." "You anticipate what I would say, though you cannot know how earnestly I say it, how earnestly I feel it, without knowing my secret heart, and hopes and fears and anxieties with which it has long been laden. Dear Dr. Manette, I love your daughter fondly, dearly, disinterestedly, and devotedly. If ever there were love in the world, I love her. You have loved yourself. Let your old love speak for me." The doctor sat with his face turned away and his eyes bent on the ground. At those final words, he stretched out his hand again and cried, "No, sir, let that be. I beg you, do not make me recall that." This cry was so like a cry of actual pain that it rang in Charles Darnay's ears long after it had ceased to be spoken. He motioned with the hand he had extended, and it seemed to be an appeal to Charles to pause. He received it as such and remained silent. "I ask your pardon," said the doctor in a subdued tone after a few moments. "I do not doubt your loving Lucy. You may be satisfied of it." He turned towards him in his chair, but did not look at him or raise his eyes. His chin drooped upon his hands, and his white hair overshadowed his face. "Have you spoke to Lucy?" "No." "Nor written?" "Never." "It would be ungenerous to affect not to know that your self-denial is to be referenced to your consideration for her father. Her father thanks you." The doctor offered his hand, but his eyes did not go with it. "I know," said Charles Darnay respectfully. "How can I fail to know, Dr. Manette, I who have seen you together from day to day, that between you and Miss Manette there is an affection so unusual, so touching, so belonging to the circumstances in which it has been nurtured, that it can have few parallels, even in the tenderness between father and child. I know, Dr. Manette. How can I fail to know that mingled with the affection and duty of a daughter who has become a woman, there is in her heart towards you all the love and reliance of an infant? I know that, as in her childhood she had no parent, so she now is devoted to you with all the constancy and fervor of her present years and character, united with the trustfulness and attachment of the early days in which you were lost to her. I know perfectly well that if you had been restored to her from the world beyond this life, you could hardly be invested in her sight with a more sacred character than that in which you are always with her. I know that when she is clinging to you with the hands of a babe, girl, and woman all in one round your neck, I know that in loving you, she sees and loves her mother at her own age, and she sees and loves you at my age, and loves her mother broken-hearted, loves you through your dreadful trial and blessed restoration. I have known this night and day since I have known you in your home." Dr. Manette sat silently, his face bent down. His breathing was a little quickened, but he repressed any other sign of agitation. "Dear Dr. Manette, always knowing this, always seeing her and you with this hallowed light around you, I have forborne, and forborne as long as it was in the nature of a man to do. I have felt, and even now feel, that to bring my love, even mine, between you is to touch your history with something not quite so good as itself, but I love her. Heaven as my witness, I love her. I believe, said her father mournfully. I have thought so before. I believe. But do not believe, said Darnay, upon whose ear the mournful voice struck with reproach, that if my fortune were so cast as that, being one day so happy as to make her my wife, I must at any time put any separation between her and you. I could or would breathe a word of what I now say, besides that I should know it to be hopeless. I would know it to be baseless, if I had any such possibility. Even in the remote distance of years, harbored in my thoughts and hidden in my heart, if it had ever been there, if it ever could be there, I could not now touch your honored hand. And he laid his own hand upon the doctor's as he spoke. No, dear Dr. Manette, like you, a voluntary exile from France. Like you, driven from it by its distractions, oppressions, and miseries. Like you, striving to live away from it by my own exertion and trusting to a happier future. I look only to sharing your fortunes, sharing your life and home, and being faithful to you to the death. Not to divide Lucy as her privilege as your child, companion, and friend, but to come in aid of it and bind her closer to you, if that can even happen. His touch still lingered on her father's hand, answering the touch for a moment, but not coldly. Her father rested his hands upon the arms of his chair and looked up for the first time since the beginning of this conference. A struggle was evident in his face, a struggle with that occasional look which had a tendency in it to dark doubt and dread. You speak so feelingly and manfully, Charles Darnay, that I thank you with all my heart, and will open all my heart, or nearly. Have you any reason to believe that Lucy loves you? No, as yet none. Is it the immediate object of this confidence that you may at once ascertain that with my knowledge? Not even. I might not have the hopefulness to do it for weeks. I might, mistaken or not mistaken, have that hopefulness tomorrow. Do you seek my guidance? I ask none, sir, but I have thought it possible that you might have it in your power, if you should deem it, to give me some. Do you seek that promise from me? I do. What do you seek? I well understand that without you, I could have no hope. I well understand that even if Miss Manette held me at this moment in her innocent heart, do not think I have the presumption to assume that I could retain of no place in her heart against her love for her father. If that be so, do you see what, on the other hand, is involved? I understand equally well that a word from her father in any suitor's favor would outweigh herself and all the world. For which reason, Dr. Manette, said Charles, I would not ask that, not even to save my life. I am sure of that, Charles Darnay. Mysteries arise out of close love, as well as out of wide division. In the former, they are subtle and delicate and difficult to penetrate. My daughter Lucy is, in this one respect, such a mystery to me. I can make no guess as to the state of her heart. May may I ask, sir, do you think she is— Charles hesitated, and her father supplied the answer. Is she sought by any other suitor? That is what I meant to ask. Her father thought, and then answered, You have seen Mr. Carton here yourself. Mr. Stryver is here too occasionally. If it be at all, it could only be one of those. Or both, said Charles. I had not thought of both. I should not think either likely. You want a promise. Tell me what it is. It is that if Miss Manette should bring to you at any time, on her own part, such a confidence as I have ventured to lay before you, you bear testimony to what I have said and your belief in it. I hope that you may be able to think so well of me as to urge no influence against me. I say nothing more of my stake in this. This is what I ask. The condition on which I ask it, and which you have undoubted rights to require, I will observe. I give you my promise, said the doctor, without any condition. I believe your object to be purely and truthfully as you have stated it. I believe your intention is to perpetuate, not to weaken, the ties between me and my other dearer self. If she should ever tell me that you are essential to her happiness, I will give her to you. If there were, Charles Darnay, if there were. The young man had taken the doctor's hand gracefully, and their hands were joined as the doctor said, Any fancies, any reasons, any apprehensions, anything whatsoever, new or old, against the man she really loved, the direct responsibility thereof not lying on his head, they should all be obliterated for her sake. She is everything to me, more to me than suffering, more than wrong, more to me— well, this is idle talk. So strange was the way in which he faded into silence, and so strange his fixed look when he stopped speaking, that Darnay felt his own hand turn cold in the hand that slowly released his. You said something to me, said Dr. Manette, suddenly smiling. What was it that you said to me? Charles Darnay was at a loss as to how to answer, until he remembered having spoken of a condition. Relieved, as his mind reverted to that, he said, Your confidence in me ought to be returned with full confidence from me. My present name, though but slightly changed from my mother's, is not, as you do remember, my own. I wish to tell you what my name is and why I am in England. Stop, said the doctor. I wish it, that I may better deserve your confidence and have no secrets from you. Stop! For an instant, the doctor even had his two hands on his ears. For another instant, he even had his two hands on Charles Darnay's lips. Tell me, when I ask you, not now, if your suit should prosper, if Lucy should love you, you can tell me on your marriage morning. Promise. Willingly. Give me your hand. She will be home directly, and it is better she not see us together tonight. Go, and God bless. It was dark when Charles Darnay left him, And it was an hour later and still darker when Lucy came home. She hurried into the room alone, for Miss Pross had gone straight upstairs and was surprised to find his reading chair empty. "My father," she called. "Father, dear." There was no answer, but she heard a low hammering sound in his bedroom. Passing lightly across the immediate room, she looked at his door and came running back frightened, crying to herself with her blood chilled, "What shall I do? Oh, what shall I do?" Her uncertainty lasted but a moment. She hurried back and tapped on his door and softly called to him. The noise ceased at the sound of her voice, and he came out to her, and they walked up and down together for a very long time. She came down from her bed to look at him in his sleep that night. He slept heavily, and his tray of shoemaking tools and his old unfinished work were there as they had been before. And that is the end of chapter 10. And I gotta say, if every chapter were like that one, I would not get lost. I actually really liked that chapter. Okay, that had lots of character, and it moved the plot forward. Good job, Mr. Dickens. Not that a celebrated author needs to be congratulated by a nobody YouTuber, but good job, Mr. Dickens. I liked that chapter a lot. It was a lot like the chapter introducing us to Jerry in front of the court. It had a story to it. And it moved our entire story forward. I don't like all the time skips, but that's just a me thing. I think that's why I like the game The Sims, because I get to see the mundane little details of every single day without big time skips. That's just a personal thing, though. But I really like that chapter. Also, a love, I was going to say triangle, but it would be a love square if Mr. Stryver's in on it, too. Stryver, Carton, Darnay, and Lucy at her final corner. Should be interesting. I hope that more of the chapters are like that one and less are like the others that are a little more obscure. But we shall see. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that chapter. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile, and I will see you tomorrow.